I think we should get going now. Otherwise, it's like, in the good old past, in some parts of this country, there used to be private buses running on city bus routes, and they used to wait for them to uh, cram the passengers, and that is, and then go. But I don't think we'll do that. Yeah, I was supposed to do with you today because the other day, um, Harshita actually was the one who wanted something on research methodology. She's not here today. And I had started on research methodology. I had finished with what was research, how it was born, and all that kind of stuff. And I just wanted to do methodology today. Now, if you're looking at the term methodology, it can also be just method. Doesn't have to be research methodology. Uh, Method will do just fine, but for reasons that we aren't always aware of, we find that there is mm, some kind of a uh, acceptance of a certain kind of uh, uh, or acceptance of a certain word or expression, even though it doesn't add anything to uh, the original word. So the original word here is method. Now, if we are going to talk about methodology or method, what is extremely important is the fact that we have to take into cognizance the whole idea of science. And if you remember, whenever I have spoken about the Greeks, I have told you that the Greeks basically did not differentiate between science and philosophy. Philosophy was exploration of what the world was. That I did in a bit of detail when we did uh, search instead of research. And science was a word which was very, very, very similar. The very similitude was so much that the Greeks used philosophy and science interchangeably. But in today's world, we don't use science and philosophy interchangeably. In fact, we basically see them in some kind of binary opposition. Okay, wherever there is philosophy, there cannot be science. Now, this particular perception about uh, science and philosophy came into being in the 19th century, actually, with Auguste Comte and the positivists. And if you look at what uh, Auguste Comte was doing, was he was trying not only to differentiate uh, between philosophy and science, but he was also trying to get rid of uh, philosophy from investigating into mankind and the society of human beings. But we'll come to that in a bit. Before that, one should know that the whole idea of method or methodology uh, precedes all this. Okay, it precedes positivism, which is Auguste Comte and his friends, like I said, and empiricism, about which we'll talk in a little bit of detail uh, shortly. Uh, so even before we moved on with positivism and empiricism, method had come into being. Now, a lot of this has to do with uh, the Renaissance uh, and the Reformation, but it also has something to do with the period before, uh, just before the Renaissance. Okay, we find that the Christians had a conception that if you did not create something, then you are not likely to understand how that thing functions. And they applied this to the universe. They said, as human beings, we are part of the universe. We are not the universe. Okay, this is where there is a divergence between Christianity and ancient Indian civilization, though there are a lot of similarities also, but I won't go into those now. The dissimilarity is that the ancient Indians believed that uh, I am the universe. It is encapsulated in the expression, Sanskrit expression, Aham Brahmasmi. Usually, a lot of people take this as a statement of arrogance, a statement of pride. It is none of those things. Aham is the self. Okay. Brahmasmi is I am the universe. Okay. Which is again something that you would find in uh, some parts of medieval thought of Europe, because they also have this thing called microcosmos or minor mundus. Uh, so what is this? When you say aham brahmasmi, you're saying that I am the universe. What it basically means is if capital A plus capital B plus capital C constitutes the universe as such, then a small a plus a small b plus a small c would constitute me, which essentially means the very principle that created the universe also creates me. And therefore, you find in the Eastern traditions the concept of dhyana. In India, it was dhyana. In China, it was Chan. In Japan, Korea, it was Zen. So, what is this? This is introspection, looking at yourself, trying to understand yourself, your actions in various different circumstances and why you might have behaved the way you did uh, in those manners, in that manner, sorry. So if you look at that, what we find then is this this thing called uh, if I understand myself, and because I'm constituted like the universe, all I have to do is conflate my findings to a bigger size, and then you have the understanding of the universe. Okay, which is also implied in microcosmos and minor mundus or minor mundus. You can use one of the two expressions. Uh, so, what we see, therefore, is that the Christians uh, at some point abandoned this principle of introspection, of trying to think for yourself. And they basically went by the constituting of tenets, which had to be followed as law or rule. So whether it is the Ten Commandments, which is not a Christian thing, it is a Judaism thing, but Christianity also has its own do's and don'ts. And it does not give any exceptions whatsoever for the do's and the don'ts. Okay, there are no exceptions. You have to follow them to the letter. Now, in doing so, they said that we did not create the universe, we don't understand it. We have to wait for revelation from God uh, to understand what this whole universe is, which is, as you can see, in stark contrast to what the Greeks were doing, be it the materialistically oriented Milesians or the more spiritually oriented Eleatic school, or even the Athenians, including Plato. So if you basically see this, what becomes uh, obvious to us is the fact that there is uh, there is an attempt to dissuade people from thinking. Okay, and this dissuading of people, well, the power is gone, but I'm on an inverter, so let's hope it works. Uh, so if you basically uh, look at the dissuasion is something that tells you if God created the universe and it is such a complex thing, then it is difficult or impossible for human beings to understand this hugely complex universe. That is basically what was being said by the Christians. When I say the Christians, it is basically the church. And when I say the church, at that time there was only one church, uh, and there weren't several churches as there are today. So if you look at the construct that if you want to know what this world is, then you have to keep the faith in religion and in God. Only those people who lead a pious life, only those people who basically are, you know, tuned into the idea of communal living as a religious uh, community. Uh, Only those kind of people will receive knowledge. And if you try to think and figure out what this universe is for yourself, then you are under the influence of Lucifer or Satan, who or devil, who was chucked out, God's once favorite archangel, who was chucked out from heaven to hell. Okay, uh, so they said if you are basically trying to uh, uh, find out things for yourself, you are under the influence of Satan, and that is not good. And you would be first warned and then severely punished, so severely that you would have to give up your life. So the church and the Christians, they posited a dichotomy between faith and reason. For them, reason or rationality was an undesirable quality, which was something that was used by the devil to draw people away, uh, which was used, it was used to draw people away from the uh, worshipping of God and uh, having faith. So there was very, very active dissonance uh, of this whole idea of rational thinking. So that is for this reason that the medieval period or the Middle Ages, as they are called, which are synonymous with Christianity in Europe, you find that these are being categorized as dark ages compared to the brilliance of Greece and the subsequent brilliance, which again came due to the Renaissance and the Reformation. So if you're looking at the Renaissance and the Reformation, I'm not going to go into those stories of what they did. You will find that the Renaissance, when when you translate that into English, it is renaissance or rebirth. And what is it a rebirth of? It's a rebirth of classical learning of uh, ancient Greece and to a certain extent even some aspects of ancient Rome. Now, if you take this into consideration, uh, you will find that uh, the scholars of ancient Greece who kind of hid in the Mediterranean region in the Hellenistic Greek world, which I told you is something which the Hellenistic Greek period is. It is the decline of the Greek period, so to speak. And so you will find that there is uh, a decline of sorts at that time, but there were wise men who had the learnings of starting from the Milesians right down to the Athenians. These people kept that particular knowledge. They kept it safe and they kept it hidden away. Now, once the medicines started happening, it basically meant that these people could come out, and they were they started coming out into the uh, Italian principalities, uh, which were the seat of the Renaissance, so to speak. Okay, I'm calling them principalities, and I'm not calling them Italian city-states because they're not city-states. I'm not going to go into that argument of why they are not city-states because that'll take up a long time, and I have been through it with some of you before. And if you look at the, if you basically look at the principalities, we call them principalities because Italian principalities like Florentino, which is Florence, Milano, which is Milan, and all these areas uh, were ruled by princes and not by kings. They could not use the designation of the king because the Christians had said that the world or the universe uh, is ruled by the one and only monarch. If you talk about monarch, it's only one person, and that monarch is God, and his representation on earth is the church and the Pope. That's what was the construct given by the Christians, and therefore uh, the earthly representations, the temporal representations of power in these particular places, the principalities, they were called the princes. And so the principalities were the ones that uh, burst out with new knowledge. And you must understand that there is a very important point that people miss out. You will not find the term, even in books written by Western authors, good Western authors like Otto Gierke. If you look at their writings, they'll say somewhere they use words like politics and state in the title of the book, but if you read the book carefully, you will find that there is no reference to politics and there is no reference as such to the state because politics was a very particularly Greek phenomenon, and it is something that came out of the polis, Polis, and the Greeks rarely use the word society. They use the word politike. Okay, politike basically meant the communion of human beings in an ethical order. And so you'll find that people like Aristotle, people like uh, Plato talk about politique. In fact, the Republic, the original title of that work is Politia. It's not the Republic, it's Politia. And Politia is the realization of the highest good of people uh, through ethical politics. Okay, but when it comes to the Romans, who, when Greece went into decline, and when Romans rose to power, you will find that the Romans had a problem. The problem that they had was they did not have a polis. And when they were translating works from ancient Greece into Latin, they found that there was no equivalent of the term uh, politics, or terms rather, let's say, politics, politique, and polis. So what do? They translate them into words that were available in Latin, and those words are republic, which was in that time res publica, Respublica. There were two different words, res publica. Uh, then societas. Some people say the the Latin pronunciation of societas is societas, and I think that is correct. So we'll stick to societas. So politique gave way to societas, and the, they still did not use the word state. They were using res publica, and they were using societas. Now, if you have to look at res publica, uh, it's a primitive form of a republic which preceded Julius Caesar. I say that it preceded Julius Caesar because Julius Caesar was the one person who basically changed the very nature of the Roman life from being an old and primitive republic. It became the grandest of empires that the world has ever seen. Okay, so before Caesar, you had three organs in the republic. One was the Senate, which was where people of a certain social standing, they were the ones who were members of that. And then you had the magistrates. Okay, they are not magistrates necessarily the way we think of a magistrate. These magistrates are the ones who were aiding and abetting the ruling of the Roman Republic. So that was the second, and the third was the one person who was the king. And please do not be under the impression that Caesar is the Roman word for king, because Caesar is not the Roman word for king. Caesar is the name, the surname, if you like, of Julius Caesar. Okay, and given his great military exploits, people after him, like Augustus, they also decided to add the name Caesar to themselves. Okay, so that's how Caesar became emperor, but otherwise it's a simple surname. And much later on, the Russians, even in the modern period, wanted to be like the Caesars, so they called them, they couldn't say Caesar, so they called themselves Tsars, Czars or Tsars. Either of those are fine, either of the spellings is fine. And then, of course, you had the Germans who called themselves Kaisers in the Prussian Empire. They called themselves the Kaisers, Kaiser. Okay, but then it all came out of a name of a person, Julius Caesar. Okay, now Julius Caesar, before he converted it, there was this republic which was ruling, and a lot of records that were there in Latin will tell you how the republics functioned. And in fact, when the Christians went for their biblical hermeneutic methodology, they relied upon Latin, Latin terms, not so much on Greek terms. Okay, but like I said, I'm not going to go into that story. I probably made a digression already. So now when we look at what happened during the Renaissance, you had this rebirth of the word politics, which is quite amazing, actually, if you look at it. Look at the Renaissance. Did it, do you see the rebirth of the polis? Do you see the rebirth of politia, politike? Do you see the rebirth of any of these? You don't. And politics for the Greeks was something that was intrinsically tied to ethics. There was no politics that was independent of ethics, and therefore you'll find Aristotle saying a good polis breeds uh, the citizens were not even called citizens because they did not have uh, they did not have uh, cities in the ancient Greek period. You'll see them talking them about the polis. A good polis breeds good politicae or human beings who are sociable in our language, and who in turn will breed an ethically good polis. Okay, so you see the complete attachment of ethics and politics. Okay, but when you come down to the Renaissance, you find this great figure. And when I say great figure, I truly mean a great figure. Uh, Machiavelli. Okay, much maligned for various reasons, uh, most of which undeserved. Machiavelli realized that as long as ethics was tied to governance. At that point, please again remember there were no governments, but there were processes of governance. So you will find that uh, as long as the processes of governance were tied to ethics, it became impossible for governance to break free of the church, to break free of the Pope. Okay, the question is, why do they have to break free of the church? And why do they have to break free of the Pope? The answer to that is very simple. Uh, the thing is that the Pope was looking into uh, the private lives of individuals and interfering with them, be they ordinary people or even kings. So when this confusion was happening, you had a couple of Franciscan friars, uh, Marsilius of Padua and William of Ockham, who said that the spiritual and the temporal realms should be separated. The spiritual and the temporal realms should be separated, and uh, that separation was not happening. Why? Because if somebody said, "Why are you a king or a prince?" They said it's by divine right. Now, if you say you are a prince or king by divine right, then there is this huge institution called the church, which is saying that we are the representation of the divinity of God. So you better be our subjects. They couldn't be separated. So Machiavelli, who was actually writing a book called The Discourses, stopped writing that book and wrote this book, Il Principe, or The Prince, in which he introduced the word politics for activities which were non-spiritual. Okay, so here is politics making a comeback without the original context in which it existed. It makes a comeback, and Machiavelli says politics should be separated from ethics. Why did he say that? Okay, if you look at Leo Strauss, the philosopher, Leo Strauss basically argues that it is pointless to talk about Machiavelli because he was a preacher of evil, because he separated politics from ethics. But people like Quentin Skinner, much later, will tell you that no, Machiavelli was not uh, a preacher of evil. In fact, he said nothing against God or religion or anything. He only said separate religion from the temporal life, which is the principality. And he said that principalities should be ruled by princes and kings, which is politics. Okay, so this was one major development. But from the point of view of method, another very major development happened uh, once again in Italy, in Padua. In Padua, you have the school of people who are called the Paduans. And the Paduans, because Nobody knows who they were individually. They're all just clubbed together as Paduvans. The Paduvans are credited with creating the nascent scientific method. Okay, so how did they do it? We were talking about how the Christians said that there was, uh, how the Christians said that there was no, what should I say, uh, way in which the people could understand the universe because they did not create it. So they picked this principle up, this particular idea up, if you like, and they found that it was a time when clock was first invented. Okay, this was during the Renaissance. And always remember when the first thing of anything is any new contraption is invented, it is usually huge, it's big. Okay, it's with words, sorry, with time that it becomes smaller, smaller, smaller. The first computers were as big as a few buildings. Today, your cell phone does what those computers cannot do. So it becomes smaller anyway, but that's just an aside. Now, when the clock was invented, the thing that these people were, the Padwans were trying to do is to say, look, we did not invent the clock. We did not invent the clock. If we did not invent the clock, then is it impossible for us to know how the clock functions? Is it impossible for us to know how the clock functions? To which their answer was, maybe not. Maybe we can understand the clock even though we didn't invent it. So what do? They do what every small child does. Okay? Give a child a toy or a small child. The first thing the child will do is break it up. You try to take it apart. Okay? They don't try to play with it, they try to take it apart. And they also use their mouth because our lips are apparently the most keen sensory organs, and therefore, if you want to understand something, it's a natural thing to put it in your mouth. So the kids, small children that we see do, they take everything into their mouth, and that is because they're trying to understand what that is. And that is exactly what uh, was done by uh, the Padwans. Only, unlike the kids, they just didn't randomly break the flock apart. What they did is they methodically dismantled the clock. By methodically, what do I mean? I mean that they say, okay, first take this part out, put it here. Then take this part out, put it here. Take this part, put it here. So that they dismantle the clock in such a manner that they could reassemble it again. Okay, if you dismantle arbitrarily, then you can't reassemble something. You don't know what goes where. So they dismantled the clock. So they took the dial off, they took the needles off, they took the gong off, they took the pulleys, the threads, everything that went into the making of a clock was taken out. till this time, when the Paduans acquired a clock, the clock represented an unknown or unintelligible complex. It's a complex because it's not made of one, it's not a monolithic thing. There are so many parts to it. Okay? It might look monolithic, but it's not monolithic. So they took them all apart. This bit is called resolution. Resolution, because you're trying to understand, okay, this is a thread. This is running around this pulley here, which is connected to this needle here. That part is the resolution to a problem, right? So the unintelligible complex that the clock was being resolved, so to speak, by the Paduans, by taking its parts out and trying to understand how exactly is it they work. Okay, and well, they took it all out. So this part of that scientific method, the early scientific method, is actually called the resolution bit. Okay. Now, of what use it is it if you simply just remove parts? It's not very useful, is it? So, if you basically want to uh, look at how this clock functions, then they decided that they have to reassemble it. So, first you have disassembly or taking things apart and looking at each part, understanding what it seems to be doing, and then putting it all back together, right? So if you do this, the Paduans found that they understood how the clock worked. So if they understood how the clock worked, they now had an intelligible complex in front of them. So the resolutive compositive method, as called, this is called the resolutive compositive method. It's probably the earliest scientific method, definitely the earliest documented scientific method. And this is something that gave people an understanding of what they didn't understand. So they took this and said, we don't have to create something in order to understand it. We can also create things which we did not do not, or did not create. We can understand them. So their argument was, it's all knowable, provided you do it methodically and thoroughly. That's why the importance of method or methodology. Right. Now we have this. You can see what kind of an effect this had on science. Okay. Today, nobody believes that water is just water. Okay. Nobody believes it's just water. What do? You can separate molecules of water into hydrogen and oxygen, H2O. So, if you want to understand what is water, you have to understand how hydrogen and oxygen come together in order to create water. So that's one example. So if you go into the periodic table, everything is this. And when you put this and this and this together, you get sulfuric acid. If you put this and this together, you get nitric acid. And, so that is how we do our science even today. Okay? It is all a question of putting things together in a particular fashion so that they perform. All right? So if you look at most of the inventions of today, they have been, they have followed this very principle, but at a much, much higher level of sophistication. And it is not just this that we look at as science, because science, as such, started developing a different meaning, thanks primarily to people like Galileo. Okay, Galileo, uh, we know him as the person who invented the telescope and who first said that it is not a geocentric world we live in, it's a heliocentric world that we live in, or the sun is the center of our universe. Well, he was punished for that anyway by the Christians. And I'm not going to go into those stories. All of you know that. But what we know very little about Galileo is his cannonball experiments. Now, if you want to understand what these cannonball experiments were and why Galileo took up these experiments upon himself, you will find that in the ancient period, those of you who attended my political philosophy classes, in Miletus, among the Milesians, there was one man called Anaximander, an absolutely, absolutely brilliant man who basically said that the Earth is not resting anywhere. It is a cylinder rotating on its own axis at a certain speed in space and therefore not falling down. But what was important for him is, why do things fall down? So if you pick up a pencil and leave it, it falls down. If you pick up a calendar and leave it, it falls down. So he was intrigued by what he said was the tendency of the things to fall. And he didn't complete his experiments before he died. And Galileo took them up. Now, what Galileo started doing was firing cannonballs from cannons at different speeds, because at that time gunpowder and all were just got available. And he found the greater the velocity with which you fire a cannonball, the longer the distance it travels in the air by resisting its uh, urge to fall. So that was the experiment that Galileo was carrying out, unfortunately, before he was imprisoned at home. But this is the basis of Newtonian science. I really hope you don't go by that cock and bull story that Newton sat under a tree, an apple fell on his head, and he wondered why the apple fell on his head and didn't go up. I mean, Newton must have seen a lot of things fall down before he saw the apple fall on his head. Okay. Uh, so Newton was possessed of this question as well. But Newton decided that the whole idea, the whole idea that things have a tendency to fall is wrongly constructed. He said it is the earth which has a tendency to pull things down when they are not held by something or when they don't have enough force to stay in the air. Okay, so we have the birth of the principle of gravity. So, scientific method. Now, in this, time becomes a, a, a principle of physics. You cannot tamper with time. Okay, our Western friends have this habit of daylight saving hour and all that, and they change the time. They change that time on the clocks, but time doesn't change. Okay, time doesn't change. And this is what Newton said. He said, even if you're there or not there, if you leave a tap which is dropping water, or rather droplets of water are falling in that, from that, they continue to fall irrespective of your interference or the otherwise. Okay. Uh, so Newton, you know the three laws of Newton. I'm not going to go into that. I'm not a science teacher. And we don't have the time as well, even if I knew how to teach those. So you will see that Newtonian science was challenged later by Einsteinian science. Okay, the absoluteness of physics, which Newton saw, is not seen by Einstein, who made things relative. Okay, he said, gravity itself is relative to weight, not weight of a thing that falls. You drop me from the second floor of a house, I'll fall to the floor within a millisecond. You drop an ant, it'll probably take 2 days to reach the ground. Why? Because it doesn't weigh a ton like me. Okay, so the heavier you are, the faster you fall. Uh, the lighter you are, the slower you fall. So that is one principle that came out of physics of Newton. Well taken. But the relativity principle is not this kind of weight. Einstein says if there are very heavy structures built into the ground, then time there has a tendency to move slowly. So he conducted experiments at the Egyptian pyramids, very heavy structures. And he did find, and people also found, that time was slower there. And then when he talked about a black hole, he said, what is a black hole? A black hole is nothing but pure gravity. Okay? A black hole is nothing but pure gravity. And if you manage to put someone in that black hole, then that person doesn't age. Okay? That person doesn't age even after 10,000 years. When you pull him out again, it'll be the same. And he demonstrated this with the speed of light, right? He said, I think I gave you this example. We always see ourselves in the mirror and think, yeah, okay. When you look at yourself, you're like, yeah, I look fine. And I look at myself, I go, what did I do to deserve this? But we do look into the mirror with varying emotions. And so Newton asked, Einstein asked the question, is the sign, is this reflection of yours in the mirror always going to happen? And he said, no. Why? He said, if you are traveling at the speed of light with a mirror in your hand in front of your face, if you're traveling at the speed of light, do you see your image in the mirror? You don't. You don't see your image in the mirror. Why? Because here now there is enough time, rather, for for a light to hit my face, go on to the mirror, reflect, and come back. Okay? So I can see myself because of the fact that there is time for reflection of the light. But if you're traveling at the speed of light, then light cannot reflect. So you can't see yourself. So here are instances of saying that things may be relative, even in physics. Nothing is absolute. Okay? So what I am trying to tell you is that the scientific method came up with experimentations, various different experimentations, starting with the resolutive-compositive method, right down to what people do today in laboratories of different kinds, chemical laboratories, physics laboratories, botanical laboratories, wherever it is, people are researching as per the rules of a method. And that is why one says that true knowledge is that which is researched knowledge and that which is being experimented on. I think I should stop here today. I've given you enough of methodology. What do you want me to do tomorrow? You want me to go back to ecology?
Yes, sir. Can you continue? Yes, sir. Ecology. Yes.
Tomorrow is ecology. So somebody bring what is there in ecology, the syllabus, and tell it to me before we start, and then I'll. The thing is, what's her name? Harshita wanted research methodology. She's absent. And 8 people wanted to attend classes. Who are the 8? Nitika. I don't know. So there are 3 out of the 8 people who wanted to attend classes. Lavanya. I put a post and Lavanya puts this or I'm coming and all that kind of thing and never comes. All right. But I will take on the slogan of the Bison Regiment of the Army and say, bash on regardless. So tomorrow we'll go back to ecology. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, but somebody please.
Thank you, Professor. See you tomorrow.
Yeah, but somebody bring the syllabus, please. Okay.
Sure, sir.
Right.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.